Let's talk about a line that no government ever wants to cross. The line that separates regulation from appropriation, persuasion from force, the line where the social contract bends and then breaks. It's a line that was crossed in the United States on April 5th, 1933, with the stroke of a pen. That pen signed Executive Order 6102, a directive that made it a federal crime for any American to own monetary gold. Citizens were ordered to turn their coins, bars, and certificates over to the Federal Reserve at a state-mandated price of $20.67 per ounce. Shortly after, the government revalued gold to $35 an ounce, a 69% devaluation of the currency in the hands of the public and a massive transfer of wealth to the state. We are told this was a national emergency measure, a relic of a bygone crisis. It could never happen again, and it certainly could never happen to silver. Today, we must examine why that assumption is dangerously naive. We are going to dissect the legal, economic, and political precedent set by Order 6102, explore the modern legislative frameworks that could enable its return, and analyze why silver, not gold, could be the primary target in a 21st century financial crisis. This isn't fear-mongering. This is contingency planning. Understanding the law is your first line of defense. First, we must understand the official justification for 1933. The Great Depression was in full swing. Bank runs were collapsing the financial system. The government argued that hoarding gold was crippling the banking sector and the economy's ability to recover. By confiscating gold, they could theoretically increase the money supply, devalue the dollar to fight deflation, and consolidate monetary control. It was framed as a patriotic duty, a temporary measure for the collective good. The key takeaway is not the gold itself, but the legal mechanism, the declaration of a national emergency, granted the president sweeping powers under the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. Your property rights, enshrined in the Constitution, were suspended by executive fiat under the banner of crisis. This established a terrifying precedent. In times of perceived systemic peril, the state can and will redefine what you are allowed to own. Now, fast forward to our era. The legal architecture for a modern confiscation is not only still in place, it has been expanded and fortified. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA of 1977, is the successor to the Trading with the Enemy Act. It grants the president vast authority to regulate commerce and seize assets upon declaring a national emergency. Crucially, the definition of national emergency has become increasingly elastic. We've seen emergencies declared for pandemics, immigration issues, and cyber threats. A severe financial crisis, a collapse of the bond market, a run on dollar credibility would undoubtedly qualify. Furthermore, post 9/11 legislation like the USA Patriot Act normalized unprecedented surveillance and asset tracking capabilities. The government now has a digital map of financial transactions that would have been unimaginable in 1933. They would not need to rely on voluntary compliance. They could cross-reference data from bullion dealers, payment processors, and vaulting services. But why would they target silver, not gold? This is the critical pivot. In 1933, gold was the official monetary metal. Today, the situation is inverted. Gold is already largely a state-owned asset. Central banks hold thousands of tons. It is a strategic reserve on sovereign balance sheets. Its confiscation from citizens today would be less impactful. The state already controls the majority of the above-ground stockpile. Silver, however, is the people's metal. It is held in massive quantities by private individuals, often in decentralized, non-bank storage. It is the quintessential hard asset of the retail inflation hedge. More importantly, silver has become strategically irreplaceable for the modern economy and the green energy transition. It is not just money. It is an essential industrial component with no viable substitute in photovoltaics, electronics, and defense systems. In a true crisis, the state would have a dual motive. First, financial, to seize a massive store of value held outside the banking system to recapitalize the state or control inflation. Second, strategic, to commandeer a critical raw material deemed vital for national security and energy independence. This transforms confiscation from a monetary policy into an industrial policy, a far more compelling argument for a modern government to make. We can see the early warning signs in recent legislation. Buried in the over 700 pages of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act are provisions and billions in funding aimed at securing a domestic supply chain for critical minerals essential to clean energy. Silver is listed as a critical mineral by the United States Geological Survey. The language empowers the government to use all appropriate means to ensure supply. This creates a legal bridge. Now, examine the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, which includes measures to reduce reliance on foreign sources for strategic materials. The rhetorical framework is being built: supply chain security, national defense, economic resilience. In a declared emergency, the leap from securing supply to mandatory contribution or compulsory purchase is a short one, legally justified under IEEPA powers. They wouldn't call it confiscation. It would be a mandatory sale for fair market value to the Strategic Silver Reserve or a patriotic contribution to the green energy mobilization. The language would be sanitized, but the effect would be the same, the transfer of private property to state control. Let's examine the most likely mechanism. A modern Order 6102 for silver would not begin with a knock on the door. It would begin with regulation and reporting. Step 1. An executive order or treasury directive mandating the reporting of all physical silver holdings above a certain threshold, say 500 ounces, by all dealers, vaults, and private mints. Failure to report would result in the loss of licensure and severe penalties. This creates a registry. Step 2. A prohibition on private sales outside of licensed dealers who are now acting as agents of the state. This kills the peer-to-peer market. Step 3. An offer of fair compensation at a price set by the government, likely a small premium over the recent paper market price, but far below the true physical free market price that would exist in a crisis. For those who comply, it's a forced sale at a loss. For those who do not, they become criminals holding an illegal asset, subject to seizure and prosecution if discovered. The pressure to comply would be immense, leveraging both fear and a distorted sense of civic duty. This scenario seems unthinkable until you realize the infrastructure is already being tested. Consider the push for central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. A CBDC is the perfect enforcement tool for such a policy. It could be programmed to block transactions for non-compliant assets, or to automatically deduct tax obligations tied to unreported holdings. The technological control grid that makes a digital dollar possible is the same grid that could make private ownership of prescribed assets practically impossible. Your financial life would exist on a ledger where every transaction is permissioned. So, what is the rational response? Panic is not a strategy. Strategic positioning is. The goal is not to defy the law recklessly, but to structure your holdings in a way that maximizes privacy, legal protection, and resilience within the existing framework. First and foremost, understand the difference between numismatic and bullion. Historical precedent, including Order 6102, included exemptions for rare and unusual coins. A modern order would likely include a similar clause. This doesn't mean your American silver eagles would qualify, but genuinely rare, historical collectible silver coins with significant premium over melt value could exist in a different legal category. This is not a recommendation, but a point of legal distinction you must research. Second, geographic diversification. Holding assets in a single jurisdiction creates a single point of failure. The laws of other sovereign nations differ. Third, silent ownership. The principle of don't ask, don't tell, don't sell, don't smell applies. Avoid creating digital footprints through boastful online posts or large traceable purchases. Use discrete, private transactions where possible and legal. Fourth, and most importantly, physical possession and control. If your silver is in an allocated account at a major depository that is immediately subject to federal regulation, it is on the digital registry. If it is in a safe, private, and secure location known only to you, it exists outside the system until you choose to bring it in. This places the burden of enforcement on the state, which lacks the resources for 100 million door-to-door searches. They rely on coercion and centralized choke points. Ultimately, the discussion of confiscation is a discussion about trust and sovereignty. Do you trust the state to manage a crisis without infringing on your property? Do you believe the financial system is sound enough to never require such desperate measures? History suggests that when the state's survival is pitted against the individual's property rights, the state wins every time. Order 6102 is not an ancient artifact. It is a legal blueprint. The economic conditions of today, record debt, currency devaluation, and strategic resource scarcity are more aligned with 1933 than with the prosperous post-war era. Preparing for this contingency is not treason. It is the ultimate act of fiscal responsibility. It is the acknowledgement that your wealth is your own, and its preservation is your duty. They made gold illegal once. To think they won't or can't do it again, or set their sights on the metal that powers both your portfolio and their green agenda, is to ignore the most urgent lesson history has to offer. The law has been written. The precedent has been set. Your only task is to decide how you will respond before the next emergency is declared. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more insights on how to navigate these uncertain times.